place in this world. Will Natalie ever find out where she truly belongs? As Natalie Carter approached her work building, nervousness fluttered in her stomach. As she entered the front door, she smiled and greeted the security guard on duty. "Hello, Hank," she said. "How's Judy and Hank Jr.?" "Great, Miss Carter," he replied. "Just found out we're having baby number 2. This time it's a girl." "I'm so happy for you," she grinned. "Oh, good. Now I can buy a few cute things for her, too." "You don't have to," he said. "My wife tried that recipe you gave us, and it was delicious. Thank you." "You're welcome, but I'd better be going," she told him. "I don't want to be late on my first day in the advertising department." "Again?" he asked, raising his eyebrow. "How many does that make now? 4 or 5? "I just can't seem to find my place in this world yet," she smiled. "I'll get there, though." "I hope so," he told her as he scanned her ID to let her through. "Take care." "Will do," she chuckled as she headed for the elevators. Within moments, the doors were opening on the 5th floor. Quietly but confidently, she walked up to the reception desk for the whole floor, which was actually the agency's marketing department. She introduced herself to the young woman there and waited as they called her team leader. 2 people actually came around the corner to stand in front of her. On the right was a dark-haired man in an expensive suit who had held open the door for the woman in a stylish suit with blonde hair. As they reached the desk, the man kept walking, not greeting Natalie or even saying a word to the receptionist, while the woman stopped toe-to-toe with Natalie. After giving her a brief once-over from her neat bun down to her sensible shoes, she sighed dramatically. "I'm Becca Hamlin, your supervisor." "Nice to meet you," Natalie greeted, holding out her hand. "I'm fully aware of who you are," Miss Hamlin interrupted, turning on her expensive high heels. "Follow me and try to keep up." After blinking off her shock, she easily caught up with the team lead, who couldn't walk very fast in those shoes. Natalie tried to take note of where things were while they were walking. Copier, supply room, bathroom, etc. She had the distinct feeling that this department wasn't going to be as friendly as the last few. Ms. Hamlin's sudden stop had Natalie losing her balance slightly as she tried to keep upright, barely managing to not bump into her supervisor. "Watch where you're going," the woman frowned as she noticed. "Sorry," she smiled, "just trying to keep up." This earned Natalie a hateful glare. "This is your cubicle," Miss Hamlin said icily. "Someone will be along to train you." She turned quickly and left. After waiting a few minutes and no one showed up, Natalie took the initiative to search her area. When she found a handbook, she began to speed read the book to understand the basics of her entry-level position. 45 minutes later, as she'd just finished, a sweet young-faced girl who looked barely old enough to vote approached her. Unlike the reception before, Leah Prentice had a quiet competence about her. Efficiently, she showed Natalie all of her duties and even a few extra ones that were outside of her normal job description, but may be called upon them to do. "I've been here several years," she smiled. "Sometimes this job is difficult, but overall I really do love this company. Hope you stick around. You seem more than capable." With a small wave, she turned to head back to her own cubicle and her own work that had piled up while she took the time to help train her. Natalie cleared her throat softly to get her attention. "If you need any help getting caught up," Natalie said quietly, "let me know." Leah nodded and smiled but didn't reply. Tasks began to pile into her inbox. Most were things she knew landed under her job title. There were a few that she knew were definitely not. While at the water fountain, refilling her drinking bottle, she'd seen Miss Hamlin approach and place several folders under the already moderate stack of work. As soon as she returned, she glanced at those files, feeling uneasy. She was extremely grateful Leah had taken the extra time to go over some of the special requests and how to find answers on the computer database of what to do. A few times she had to call or email Leah, but she was able to walk her through each challenge. On several occasions, even she was at a loss, and Natalie had to figure it out on her own. Each time she turned in her task, Miss Hamlin would just sneer and huff. Each day, she earned more and more of her coworkers' respect. They all noted how she did all that was asked of her and more without one word of complaint. In the middle of her second week, Natalie encountered a task that she, Leah, and even the database didn't have an answer on how to do. An online search gave her an idea of how to finish it, but there were several ways to accomplish the goal. She chose the option that made the most sense in regards to the result that was wanted. It was only moments after turning in her analysis that she was called into the department manager's office. Looks of pity were on most of the faces of those she passed on her way. Curiosity rose with each step as she smiled reassuringly to them. Before she could step into the main hall that led down to his office, Leah grabbed her arm and pulled her into the doorway of a supply room. "Rumor is that the manager and Miss Hamlin have a problem with you," she confided. "I don't know why. Be careful." "It's okay," Natalie replied. "I'd better be going, thank you." Leah nodded and went ahead through the supply room door without anyone seeing them talking together. She made quick work of the remaining distance and knocked on the manager's door. "Come in," said a gruff, deep voice. She'd heard about him from the other co-workers. Mostly it was overheard conversations. Derek Thomas rarely spoke to anyone in the entire department except for the team leads. Supposedly, he only talked to the little people to berate, warn, or fire them. Checking the time on her phone, she smiled, pushing a button, and returned it to her jacket pocket. "You wanted to see me?" Natalie asked politely as she entered the office, taking in the room at a glance. It was large and full of expensive-looking decor. It was a little too gaudy for her taste, but to each his own. "Ah, Miss Carter," Mr. Thomas said, not bothering to even glance up or look her in the eye. "It's come to my attention that one of your recent assignments was done incorrectly." "It was done, though," Natalie replied, looking directly at him. As his face rose, his eyes flashed with an emotion that made her skin crawl. "Your point?" he asked. His words clipped as he deliberately set down the pen in his hand. "I did complete what was asked of me, even though I was not trained for creating that report," she stated calmly. "I asked others who've been here longer. No one could tell me how you wanted it done. It wasn't even in our handbook. I researched methods and chose one. I wasn't given any other instructions than to just do it." "I see," he sneered. "So you're saying it's my fault?" "No, I didn't say that," she replied calmly. "I am saying that there was a communication lapse. Was the report wrong? I can fix it if there were any mistakes." "It's already left this department," he said. "If there's a next time, check with the team lead." "Dismissed." He waved his hand, dismissing her, and returned his attention down toward the papers on his desk. "Of course," she said to him. She turned and walked out of the office. Fuming, she stopped only after a few steps and took several deep, long, calming breaths, leaning up against the wall. She was so angry that she was surprised that steam wasn't coming out of her ears with how hot she felt. How could a man like that be the head of one of the largest departments? She repeatedly inhaled and exhaled slowly to try to lower her blood pressure. Hearing a noise from Mr. Thomas's office, she snapped back to reality and realized he was making a phone call. On what sounded like the second ring, someone picked up. "That did not go as planned," he said angrily. Natalie could hear mumbling, but couldn't make out any of the words on the other end of the line. "Yes, I know. I want her out too. She just jumps from department to department, never taking this company seriously. The marketing proposal she prepared, I don't know how she did so well with it. Well, I didn't want it to go to waste, so I passed it off as my own work. Who cares? She'll be gone soon. We have that little thing to get ready for." "Until then," he said, ending the call. "Now on with my plan." She heard him call for the receptionist. Quickly ducking into the supply room, she waited until she heard the receptionist pass, and then quickly went back to her desk. Her inbox was full of research or typing to do. Before even looking through that mountain of work, she looked around carefully. Everyone she saw was involved in their own work, and a lot of people were out to lunch, splurging a little and celebrating since it's a little before Friday. Opening a blank email, she put the word urgent in the title of it, and then, in the body of the email, she simply typed one word: tomorrow. Deciding to eat her lunch sitting at her desk that day, she chose to dive directly back into her work as soon as she was done. As she was leaning over to throw away her trash, she heard a handful of the elite sales team return. They were talking in hushed whispers and, in her opinion, being over-the-top dramatic. Sighing, Natalie turned and ignored them, choosing to focus on the work she needed to finish. Just as she completed the last task for the day, a note was dropped onto her desk without a signature. She saw someone walking toward the elevator and recognized the handwriting immediately. Reading it quickly, she folded the note and tucked it in her pocket as she gathered her personal items and left. Leah wanted to meet her outside. Natalie smiled as the elevator doors closed and it descended to the first floor, where she casually left the building. Instead of headed home, though, she walked across the street to the park and slowly made her way to the far edge of it. She smiled when she caught sight of Leah sitting on a bench watching ducks waddling around near a pond. "Long time no see," Natalie Natalie laughed, scaring her and making her jump. "Natalie!" she exclaimed. "I didn't hear you." "I can see that," Natalie smiled. "Penny for your thoughts." "Well, they're $1 now," Leah quipped. "Inflation and all, you know." "Well worth the price," she smiled. "What's up?" She sat down and turned to face her friend. "Have you heard the rumors that are going around?" Leah asked, concern evident all over her face. "I wasn't sure if anyone had told you." "I've heard some hush whispers, but no one said anything about rumors," she replied. "Our department is sorely lacking in the teamwork aspect," she frowned. "Anyway, there's talk of the CEO stepping down, and the whole company is going nuts regarding what may happen next." "Wow!" Natalie wasn't sure what to say to that. "What do you think is going to happen?" "Your guess is as good as mine," she sighed. "I just hope I don't get laid off." "I highly doubt that," Natalie assured. "They'd be crazy to fire you." Leah smiled, and they continued to talk for a while, until their stomachs began to growl from hunger. Laughing, they exchanged numbers, agreeing to meet up for brunch that Saturday and go shopping together before heading in their separate directions. Running late for work that next morning, Natalie jogged through security and to the elevators. Arriving at her desk exactly 11 minutes late, she sat down in her chair, noticing that her inbox was already piled high with work. She managed to catch up quickly by applying herself to the tasks all morning. At lunchtime, most of the people had headed out to celebrate the weekend early. Natalie wasn't surprised when her phone rang moments later. Swiftly answering it, she was greeted with Ms. Hamlin's icy voice. "Department manager's office, 15 minutes, she said. Natalie heard the telltale click of the line going dead and hung up the receiver. Taking a moment, she gathered her composure and quickly straightened up her desk before standing to head toward the meeting. She didn't take the full 15 minutes before arriving at Mr. Thomas's door. Straightening her skirt, she placed her phone in her pocket. With the attitude she had heard from Miss Hamlin, she went ahead and just walked through the doorway, since the door was propped open slightly. She raised her eyebrows in surprise at the scene that awaited her. Mr. Thomas was in a passionate embrace with Miss Hamlin. Natalie smirked, but schooled her features before clearing her throat to let them know she was there. Immediately they leapt apart. "I told you 15 minutes, Miss Hamlin seethed, glancing at her watch. "It's only been 4. "I can see that I wasn't expected yet," Natalie stated, suppressing the urge to chuckle. "Would you like me to leave and come back?" "You impertinent!" Miss Hamlin started, but was stopped by Mr. Thomas. "Let's just get this over with," he said in a bored tone. "I don't tolerate tardiness. You were late today, so I'm letting you go. Take your personal items only. I'll have security come to escort you out of the building. If you dare to mention what you saw today, I'll make sure you won't find a job in this time zone." "I see," Natalie nodded. "As a manager, I wasn't aware that you held that much power or influence." "Soon I shall," he smirked. "I'm sure even you've heard that the CEO is stepping down. I'll be taking over for him. Now get your things and leave." Nodding but not saying a word, she left his office. Stopping at the desk, she smiled when she saw it was her friend, Hank, who was the one standing there waiting on her. "Natalie, what happened?" he whispered. She gathered her items and sent a quick text on her phone before facing her friend. "I'm fine," she smiled. "I didn't do anything wrong, but I think this is for the best." Hank did not look convinced. He escorted her to the lobby and waited as she confidently walked out the door, wondering if he'd ever be able to work with her again. Later that evening at home, Natalie texted Leah to let her know what happened. She had already heard about it through the company gossip line, but not anything she actually believed. The rumor going around was that Natalie was fired for her own tardiness and she'd stolen someone else's marketing content to use as her own. They chatted for a few minutes and Natalie had to assure her she was indeed fine. Afterwards, she made a phone call. She was on the phone and sending emails until she went to bed around midnight with a satisfied smile on her face. Meeting Leah for brunch at 10:30 a.m. the next morning at a hole-in-the-wall restaurant, Natalie wasn't sure about actually eating there until she entered the front door. Delicious aromas of meat and spices vied for her attention, as well as the smell of fresh baked bread making her mouth water. Leah waved to catch her eye. She walked over to the corner booth and had a feeling Leah wanted a heart-to-heart. "I'm glad you decided to still meet me," Leah said sadly. "Of course," she replied. "Why wouldn't I?" Sliding into the bench across from her, she casually opened a menu. "I wasn't sure you'd want to keep in touch after everything," she admitted. "You're my friend," Natalie replied, looking directly in her eyes. "I don't turn my back on my friends." "I was thinking about it last night," Leah said softly. "Maybe I should quit. I don't think think you should just yet, Natalie smiled. You'll miss all the fun. What do you know that I don't? She asked, a curious look on her face. Natalie leaned in, and in hushed tones that no one else could overhear, she calmly explained what was going on. Leah's eyes grew wide in surprise upon hearing the whole story, but then she began to laugh. Covering her mouth to stifle the sound, her eyes shone with mischief. So you see, Natalie said, I already have a new job. Mr. Big Shot Thomas has quite a rude awakening coming. I can't wait to see how this turns out, Leah smiled, feeling light as a cloud. Let's eat so I can pick out a new outfit. I guess I need to look decent if there's going to be a new CEO soon, like the rumors are saying. You never know, Natalie said, a twinkle in her eye. It may be more fun than you think. Leah chuckled at her as they each intently studied the menu to decide on what they were ordering before the waiter returned. Leah, dressed in a new sky blue gown, sat among the crowd gathered in the beautifully decorated banquet hall the company had rented out for a retirement party of the CEO, Travis Brown. There was a huge crowd gathered. Mr. Brown was widely known in the marketing industry and had amassed countless contacts during his business dealings over the years. As she glanced around while taking a sip of water, she almost choked seeing Mr. Thomas on stage in the wings. He was acting like he was running the show. He didn't look happy at the moment, she thought to herself, smiling. She wondered what was going on. She guessed she'd find out sooner or later. Only a few minutes later, Mr. Thomas strutted out onto the stage to the microphone at the tall, slender podium. He tapped on it loudly, gaining the attention of the entire room as the microphone squealed through the hall. Satisfied, he cleared his throat and looked briefly at the note cards in his hands. Thank you all for coming, he began. We're here today to honor our CEO, Mr. Travis Brown, and thank him for his years of service and commitment to Prism Marketing. He has truly been a mentor and a role model for so many. We're truly sorry to have you retire, but are genuinely happy for what your plans are for the future. Let's show our gratitude for the guest of honor. Mr. Thomas held out his hand with a flourish, directing the attention to the CEO as he walked up onto stage and out to the podium. Thank you for the warm introduction, Derek, said Mr. Brown, his expression unreadable as he turned to the crowd and smiled. It has been a pleasure to work alongside all of you these many years. I know news of my retirement was sudden to a lot of you, but it's been in the planning stages for years. This evening, I'd like to introduce my successor. Derek, would you join me here at the podium? As Derek confidently walked out to join him, murmurs spread like wildfire through the people below. Leah actually heard several around her gasp and a few soft oh no's. This was not an easy decision for me to make, and I didn't make it lightly, he told everyone. My choice is someone most of you have met in the last year and a half. My replacement as CEO of Prism Marketing is Natalie Carter. The crowd erupted in cheers as Derek's face morphed from a smug smile to a look of utter shock, then anger. He glared as Natalie confidently walked onto stage with grace and poise in an elegant dress. But she was fired, Derek protested. His voice was picked up by the sensitive microphone, and the whole room froze. Not a single sound was heard except the unfaltering steps of Natalie as she approached Mr. Brown. That is true, Natalie smiled. Mr. Thomas fired me for being 11 minutes late. He also threatened that I'd never find work again if I exposed his workplace affair with his team lead, Miss Hamlin. Murmurs and gasps again filled the room. Suddenly, a beautiful woman from the head table stood, anger radiating from her eyes. Jill! Exclaimed Derek, quickly walking toward the steps down to the main area. She's lying, I swear. Mrs. Thomas, I'll be in contact so you can hear and get a copy of the recordings and other evidence for your lawyer, Natalie told her. I'm here for you. Thank you, Miss Carter, she said sadly as she turned and strode out of the banquet hall, holding her head high even though tears were streaming down her cheeks. Derek turned, his face red with rage. How dare you, he bellowed. You have no right to interfere in my private life. Generally, I'd agree, she calmly replied, but you're the one who brought it into the workplace. Threatening me is a criminal offense as well. Wait, no, you misunderstood, he faltered, trying to backtrack. No, there was no misunderstanding, she responded icily. It was all recorded, by the way. Derek paled at her words. Here at Prism Marketing, we have a zero-tolerance policy for violence, bullying, and any other crimes, said Mr. Brown. As my last official act as CEO, you are now suspended without pay pending an investigation in conjunction with the police. Shock washed over Derek's face at the mention of police. Leah hadn't thought his face could get any paler, but it had. He looked about to faint when the the marketing department began to cheer, he turned red again, but this time from embarrassment. Accepting defeat for the time being, he glared at Natalie before turning and leaving the party. Before stepping up to the microphone, she caught sight of Miss Hamlin out of the corner of her eye, sneaking out the side door of the hall. Deciding to deal with her on Monday, she let her go quietly. They'd already had enough drama for the evening. With a calmness that immediately put everyone at ease, she turned to the microphone again and smiled warmly at everyone. Most of you who do know me are probably surprised by my sudden promotion, she chuckled. Most of the group laughed, dispelling any lingering negativity from before. This entire time, the 2 years I've worked with and for you, I've been like a gypsy drifting from department to department. This earned some snickers here and there. I didn't want to come in and just try to take over for Travis, Mr. Brown. He and all of you deserve someone who'll care about the business, but more importantly, all of you who make this company the success that it truly is. Thank you for this opportunity. I will do my absolute best to help Prism Marketing grow and to be even more of an industry leader in this new era. Everyone erupted in applause and came to their feet, not expecting this sort of response. Tears sprung up to her eyes in surprise as she realized that Leah was grinning from ear to ear and clapping louder than those around her. Natalie felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Travis smiling at her with pride shining in his eyes. Perfect. I knew this is how it would turn out. I know the company is in great hands. Ms. Hamlin became a topic of gossip for several weeks around the office. Leaving her resignation, she disappeared without a trace. It came out later that she ended up having to move to another part of the country to start over, though it didn't go well. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas's next few months were positive for Natalie and Mrs. Thomas. Of course, Mr. Brown pursued Mr. Thomas to the fullest extent of the law. Mrs. Thomas divorced him with the evidence provided by Natalie and went back to her maiden name, Ms. Jill Hanley. Natalie found that Jill was extremely talented as an artist and hired her while helping her to start over. Prism Marketing's reputation only rose after all the drama and the change in leadership. People were applying in droves for the chance to work there. Do good and it will come back to you tenfold. The same goes with the bad. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to support the channel. Feel free to check out this one next.